Hi everybody, welcome to Holistic Harmony. Thanks for joining me. Today I want to talk about 7 cultural narratives and programs that are worth examining. I'm just going to roll right into it. Number 1, the narrative that we see in society as to what a healthy relationship looks and feels like. I know I used to be locked into all kind of false narratives about what is a successful relationship, what's a secure relationship, and what does that feel like and look like. And really, the narrative that spouses and partners are even necessary is something to look at because it turned out that it's not. But you can look at the world that way and think that a partner is necessary, and it can feel like the end of the world when you're losing a partner. But when you do examine it, you realize that we don't actually need the partner to survive. We just enjoy the partner for the the relationship when it's healthy anyway. So the narrative that we can't live without our partner, like, this is something huge that I wanted to mention because I think that a lot of like a flare-up of depression or anxiety or stress is tied to our interpersonal relationships, and when those are wrapped up in a false narrative and they're feeling very disappointing or unfulfilling, a lot of times just looking at our expectations and how we're perceiving our relationship and our partner, that there's a lot of distortion in there. So this just clears up a lot of things with not trying to emulate the image that we see on TV or in magazines or on Facebook. I mean, obviously people aren't posting pictures of themselves and their partners when they're in fights or when they're having a really crappy day or when the communication's gone sour. You're seeing the highlight moments. And so to assume that relationships are just supposed to be this nonstop series of happy moments where you're feeling affirmed and your needs are met and you're just bumping along, going along with the social narrative, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. So definitely, like with marriage, when you do get married, you have this idea of what it's supposed to look like, the wedding, the engagement ring, the honeymoon. All of these things are very expensive, by the way, so it's no wonder that there's a lot of support to keep this machine going, where we have this whole wedding culture and people will put second mortgages on their house to give their daughter or son a phenomenal wedding, as if that had anything to do with the quality of the marriage. So definitely examining the narrative of what we see in culture as a healthy relationship and asking, does that really resonate with my true needs? It's a very narrow view of happiness to try to just uphold this image and not to really have the quality interpersonal relationship. When it's more about image than real essence is when it's kind of doomed. It's going to need some attention. That's not going to last forever. It's not going to be fulfilling anyway. My advice is just to remind yourself that we all refine who we are in the process of life, and just learning from our mistakes, and as well as from being in relationships with people who don't make us feel good or just rub us the wrong way eventually. Not all relationships are meant to last forever, so it's definitely not about prolonging something that needs to end. I think it's beautiful that we can experience each other for a time and release that and know that it's always a part of us, but it doesn't have to be in a part of like our current day life or anything to still have that essence of the love that we shared. But again, just learning that, or seeing that we learn from our mistakes, we refine ourselves over time, and if you are in a relationship and you feel like it's disappointing you because it's not meeting this criteria, well, look at where you got that criteria from, and think about how grateful you are that your partner is willing to laugh off and kind of overlook when you've been kind of a butthole. So it goes both ways. Seek out the humanity in each other, and seek out the humanity in yourself. when two people can recognize that we're all just figuring it out along the way and no one's perfect, and that we're definitely not getting the rules for like how to be perfect from culture. So definitely don't hold your relationship or your partner to those standards, because that's not good for anybody. Number 2, the mentality that omits selfhood or self-responsibility. And for me, this is a huge mental block for a lot of people, is the conditioning that a lot of people have to externalize their power and externalize their authority. And we do this by, excuse me, excuse me. We do this by externalizing authority to doctors, to teachers, to religious figures, celebrity scientists, to the news, to our parents, and as well to healers. And the thing about that is that my truth, anyway, that I found is that I did not need to externalize authority or power. I didn't need to, excuse me, I didn't need to be told by a designated authority figure how to feel about something or how to quantify something. I realized that, now in the case of healers, of course healers have a lot to offer, and in an essence they can heal people, but I think that the best healing you can give a person comes right along with the knowledge or the insight, the invitation to access their own power. So like if someone goes to a Reiki healing session, now that's a lot of beautiful people work in the healing arts and do the energy healing and have absolutely the best intentions. And this is not to discredit anything like that or any of the healing arts. This is just an example that I'm using, where a person has an injury or a pain or a blockage of some kind, and when they call out and go to a healer of any kind, it's kind of an agreement to be unable to handle yourself or to know what the truth is. It's kind of saying, to the universe, I don't know what to do with myself. I want someone else to decide. I want the Reiki healer to evaluate where my energy blockage is and what I need. And when they heal it, I'll walk out of here and it'll be gone. And for that person not to be involved in it, for nothing to be surfaced in the awareness, I feel like it's kind of a temporary solution, which temporary solutions are great. They get us through rough patches and enable us to get back our clarity so we can get back on the ball with directing our own life. It is up to you. The answers are within you. When we externalize our power that we already have but don't yet recognize, it's an agreement with lack, with need, and with inability. It can alleviate the condition simply because we want to heal and we believe that it can heal, and absolutely that's real. But we're not liberated from the false narratives until we're walking in our own power. When you actually wake up and see the bigger picture and this overview of human existence, and you see the true nature of our evolution and modern civilization, you realize you can't rely on the authority figures that we're presented with. Not the scientists, not the scholars, not even our parents in most cases. So a lot of people will turn to a higher power. And the problem is that even then we're externalizing power, whether it be to God or the pastor or whatever. We're letting someone else interpret the truth, and we're also letting them kind of tell us what is the meaning of everything happening, and we're being conditioned to rely on that authority figure to tell us what we should already see and feel for ourselves. Selfhood is developing out of the old narrative. It's accepting responsibility for our perceptions, for our interpretations. It's using discernment from within. It's knowing our truth, and it's knowing true liberation from fear. And fear is really the base of a lot of our mental blockages and our cages that we're kind of locked into that keeps us attached to these old false narratives. So letting go of the fear is huge. Number 3 cultural program that you might want to examine is the misidentification as ego. And that really just means that you or someone is misidentifying with their social identity, their career title, their public image, their past social image, their past experiences, whatever their narrative is of who they are. And a lot of times when there's a misidentification of self as ego, the self-worth hinges on that social approval. So that in itself locks you into a lot of rules that are totally based on a false construct, that aren't based on something that's organic or has the best interest of humanity in mind. I have some quotes that I want to share with you that are from some different people, but this first one is from Michael Tsarion. And this is from his book, Disciples of the Mysterium. The ego is simply a pseudo-self, a construct of the world in which man lives, a pastiche of the collective's idea of what man should be. Until the ego is realigned with the imperial self and mysteria uprooted, the ego will continue to fantasize that what it creates is more real than reality itself. As a result, man will remain existentially derelict. And if you're wondering, like I was, what a pastiche is, it's basically when your work is imitating the style of someone else's work. Also from Michael Tsarion, the ego is not to be crushed by asceticism or medicated by drugs. Rather, it is to be attuned to the imperial self that responds to the call of being and seeks to balance all psychosomatic hemispheres. And that just means mind and body. And here I have a Nietzsche quote. Behind your thoughts and feelings, my brother, there stands a mighty ruler, an unknown sage whose name is self. In your body he dwells. There is more reason in your body than in your best wisdom. Also from Michael Tsarion, man's ego and its aspirations are the result of subliminal acts of self-deception forced upon people by the direct and indirect impositions of parents and society. Undoing the devices of self-deception can only be undertaken by oneself after a period of reflection and self-analysis. And this kind of goes hand in hand with identifying as the intellect. That seems like a very modern culture issue, is the academia take on everything, because that's really tied in with the science and technology. So they all kind of have this reductionist, physical focused way of looking at life, and that really makes it so that people who are very intelligent, well educated, can be very locked into a false narrative and feel completely supported by their peers, their academic community, and society at large. So that's a thing. Number 4 cultural program worth examining is the narrative of the thing common knowledge. Recognize that common knowledge is a shit sandwich. And like everything else, there's going to be a little bit of good in it, and the point is to just see through this narrative of common knowledge. Take, for example, the food pyramid that we were programmed with in my generation anyway. When we went to school, we were taught, you're going to need this bottom layer full of, bread and starches and candy, just a little bit, and sugar just a little bit, but, definitely get it in there. Even the 3 meals a day narrative, I feel, is bullshit. And I'm going to make some future videos after I finished up some research on some things that I'm doing here, but oh man, the food issue, the false narrative about what a healthy diet is, how much you're supposed to eat, what your calorie intake should be, like as if every single person is supposed to be taking 2,000 calories. All the crap that's in food, and it's on the shelves, it's what everyone is eating, it's what you see people eating on TV. So there's just this false narrative that it's safe out there to not know what you're doing and to just go buy the food off the shelf or turn on the TV or whatever. It's common knowledge makes it seem like this is all innocent, what's going on out there. So common knowledge is kind of useless for me. The common knowledge that urine is a waste product. That's one of the things that I'm going to talk about in the future. And then the common knowledge that if something like that were true, that if urine is not a waste product, that if that's true, that you'd know about it. That's a totally false narrative that a lot of people the ego uses it really to kind of secure its position and its story. But like when you try telling people about these natural health miracles that I remember how they were unbelievable to me years ago, and I would just assume I heard people wrong, or they're full of shit or whatever. But when it's part of your reality and you see it working for yourself and you're talking to people and it's working for them, and then you try to tell your relatives, people you love, and you want to share this information with them, and just so they have it in their toolkit, and they'll say things like, if that was real, I'd know about it. The doctors would tell you. It would be part of, the treatment when you go to the doctor. So it's just the common knowledge that if you needed to know something important about, life, you'd know it, you'd hear about it, and that's not true at all. So, and this is what you're going to do with all your time once you, chop off your useless, false, non-resonant stuff, is you dive into absorbing the good stuff, finding how to resonate with your truth, refining your discernment. And you don't rely on common knowledge, you don't need it. You work with the inner knowing, the sensations, just all of your awareness facets. Different things like the doctor knows best, or that anyone who creates a child is qualified to be a parent, and that it's okay to just keep figuring some stuff out blindly, and that the help that's offered from our culture is very superficial and just seems kind of like a lot of distractions, and yet medical treatment and all this other stuff is just a huge business. Okay, moving on. Number 5, cultural programmer narrative that is worth examining. The narrative of science as authority. Science and technology play a big part in the media as well as in medicine. It's similar to religious programs with designated vicars of God, namely Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye. And I used to love Bill Nye. I was introduced to him in high school. I went to a private Christian high school for 1 year, and the science teacher would play us Bill Nye videos, and I'm like, who is this, kind of cool / geeky surfer kind of guy? To me, that was like progress, where boring school subjects were made fun and more similar to celebrity culture and entertainment. And now I kind of see that that's how they program a whole generation of kids to believe a certain way and to build that common knowledge. And even just a few years ago when Bill Nye and Ken Ham did the creation debate, I was psyched for that. I remember calling up my mom to get in conversations with her. She's a very devoted, born-again Christian, and I was at the time in my 5th or 6th year identifying as an atheist. So it's always good to go up in discussions like that with your mom, right? But when you look at these guys, they're heavily promoted, and they're just everywhere. They really are there to be the voice of science and technology. They are like the priests of science. You look at all the organizations that promote them as authority figures, and you see that it's this one web of the same system. Try letting your head out of the consensus box and just allow yourself to consider new ideas, even if it's just for a moment. Even if you say to yourself, I'm going to consider just for today or just for the next 5 minutes, what if the earth is flat? And I'm not saying it is, but it's one of those things, if you start doing online research, there's a whole community of people that believe that it is. And I don't really feel like weighing in either way, but it's one of those things that if you reject it right away based on what you learned in school and all the globes and maps and just the programming that's shaped your conscious reality, then you're working off bad, or you're not working off bad, well, you are working off bad programming, but your blockage is working off conditioning. It's working off low awareness, and it's working off a false narrative that you already know the truth and already know everything you need to know, and that anything so crazy as a flat earth is just laughable. So it's breaking out of that shell. It's not being ashamed of yourself just for thinking, just for considering new ideas. So it's not about round earth, flat earth, whatever. It's about your mind being able to even consider a new idea. That's how we use our imagination. That's how we imagine possibility and potentials, and it's how we determine what we want to use our willpower for. So I'm finishing this point with a Michael Tsarion quote. The Taoist knows how precious Mysteria is to men possessed by it. He does not wish to take their beloved bride from their side. He knows that religion and technology are methods for conceiving, birthing, and nurturing Mysteria. He knows how much man has sacrificed on the altar of a Mysterium, and the price he has paid to be a disciple. And that price, a lot of times, is woven in the chains that keep them tied to a false narrative. Number 6, the narrative of history and heritage. The narrative that the peoples of ancient times and even of not so long ago history, that they were all ignorant savages who required civilizing. And this view of the unfolding of civilization over the thousands of years, and looking at colonialization as just advanced people helping out these ignorant savages, this is one of the mentalities that locks out old simple truths of natural healing and relies on the science priest narrative of us being at the cutting edge of medical treatment now. And I'm not going to go too far into that. Another false narrative of history and heritage, an easy one, is St. Patrick's Day. I know some Irish people that are not going to be too happy to hear about this, but it doesn't have to ruin your St. Patrick's Day itself. But the way that you look at the holiday might change. St. Patrick's Day is not actually an Irish holiday. It originally was a Catholic holiday, and St. Patrick himself is not even Irish. He was British, and his real name was Maewyn Sakat. He was pagan atheist until age 16. He was captured by Irish marauders, sold to a Druid chief, 6 years captive. He became a Christian. One night he heard a voice telling him to escape and go get on an awaiting ship, so he went home. And there he spent 12 years in the monastery, changed his name to Patricius, and later went back to Ireland and became a bishop. The Druids there had him arrested several times. Patrick established monasteries, schools, and churches throughout the land, so there are a lot of versions of history where he's just this, beneficent saint, of Ireland. He returned to the Druid chief to pay his ransom and set everything on fire. And that whole thing about St. Patrick driving out the snakes from Ireland is symbolism for him driving out the pagans and basically the people that had the nature wisdom, that were in touch with the cycles of the earth, that were in touch with natural healing, and that knew the value of carrying down the knowledge through the ancestors through oral tradition. Because libraries are getting burned back and right, or left and right back then, so a lot of the ancient wisdom is passed down through oral tradition, and something like that would just be laughed off today. So definitely looking into your narratives, what you think about history and your heritage, and just being open. It's not judging it. All the meaning that you've put, the good meaning that you've put into identifying with something, that doesn't need to go to the polar opposite of now it means something bad that you're identifying with it, and it didn't mean what you think. It's all about removing all of the false meaning, good, bad. It's about getting out of that duality and not getting polarized either way. Christopher Columbus and the whole colonialization is another one to look in. The long and ongoing history of using politics and war to unsettle nations and drive out people from their homes. The Inquisition, was not much different, but today science and technology is the new religion, and all the heretics are to be seen as dusty anti-progressives, savages. And number 7. The number 7 cultural narrative and program worth examining is the mentality that all contrast is bad and should be avoided or complained about. And by contrast, I mean when things in your environment are not cooperative or complementary, but they are contrasting. They are giving you an issue. It's going against the grain. It's discordant. It's not what you wanted. Contrast. A good thing to remember, and I told myself this for weeks at a time, and I really think that it helped me shift my perception, is that everything is potentially a teacher. And if you can remind yourself of that in a moment where things have just turned for shit, if you can remind yourself that everything is potentially a teacher, instead of getting angry, getting discouraged, getting tense, getting stressed, any of that, seeing this moment as potentially a teacher and looking for how it could be a teacher. What lesson could you derive from this experience? And if you've already remembered to deal with these setbacks and triggers and whatever's going on with staying in your balance, not getting wrapped up in the narrative, then you already can kind of see or recognize the benefit that comes from, the stuff that we don't want to happen. We learn so much from it. We learn about ourselves. We learn about other people. It changes our expectations afterward. It gives us more compassion when we know that, we're dealing with everything's falling apart and we're really stressed out and we've got to go, deal with someone and they're, rude to us. And that exchange, that feeling of not being acknowledged is contrast, but yet that teaches us how it feels to be on the receiving end of someone who's just very low aware and wrapped up in their own, selfishness. it gives you that expansion in awareness that everybody has these days and everybody has these moments, and no matter how balanced and aware you are, you're still going to get pulled into different things. That just is how life goes. Maybe you can go be a hermit and live in the mountains, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about dealing with life as it comes, moment to moment, and not feeling like you've got to go get on Google or go to an authority figure to get an answer when you do feel unsettled. That you already have the tools to get back that balance. So everything is potentially a teacher. Ooh, I need to hurry. Here's a Nietzsche quote. There is no clearer mirror of a thing than its supposed opposite. And that's really, learning from contrast, learning what we do want by experiencing what we don't want. The more we encounter and feel and see and recognize non-love, the more we know the true essence of love, and the more we seek pure and purer love. Recognizing the full depth of the beauty of a thing by experiencing firsthand the depth of the pain caused by its loss. That's another example of learning apophatically and learning from contrast. So there's just a lot to be gained from contrast: insight, compassion, awareness, a healthy perspective on what's going on in your life. Another example of seeing contrast for the value it has is when you didn't appreciate a person's characteristics until they weren't in your life anymore, and then you experienced the opposite, someone else that did just kind of the opposite things and they were even worse. And then it reveals a new perspective and a new appreciation for fuller awareness. Thank you guys so much for listening. Good luck.